Hello, and a huge welcome to the channel. If you're looking for cross-dressing stories that are emotional, intriguing, and truly empowering, you've come to the right place. You really want to wear this? The question hung in the air, sharp and direct, slicing through the polite hum of the office. It wasn't an accusation. Not exactly. It was something more complex, a challenge. A final checkpoint before crossing a border from which there might be no return. The voice belonged to Clara, my new manager. She stood with one hand on her hip, a posture of casual authority that seemed as natural to her as breathing. Her eyes, a cool, intelligent grey, were fixed on me, waiting, around us. The world of femme finesse revolved in a silent, elegant dance. Mannequins draped in silk dresses stood like silent goddesses. Walls were lined with shelves displaying an impossible array of high heels, from delicate stilettos to bold platform pumps. And everywhere, there were legs, sleek, plastic legs sheathed in every color and texture of pantyhose imaginable. My name is Ethan, and at 29 years old, I had decided to detonate my life. I'd walked away from a soul-crushing job in data analysis, a world of spreadsheets and predictable outcomes, to chase a long-buried fascination with fashion. This internship was meant to be my fresh start. A foot in the door of an industry I admired from afar. I had applied for a position in outerwear, hoping to learn about tailoring, fabrics, the architecture of a good coat. I felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks, my sensible trousers and button-down shirt, my armor in the corporate world I'd just fled, felt heavy and out of place here. The very air seemed different, scented with a faint, expensive perfume and the crisp newness of textiles. Clara had greeted me with a firm handshake and a disarming smile. "Ethan? Welcome," she'd said, her voice a smooth alto. "It takes courage for a man to step into this environment. I respect that. This is a place of creativity, not judgment. Remember that." Her words had been a lifeline. I felt my shoulders relax. My anxieties ease just a fraction. I could do this. I could learn. Then she had guided me to her office. A glass-walled cube that overlooked the entire design floor. She gestured for me to sit, then leaned back in her own chair, steepling her fingers. "So, about your position," she began, her tone shifting from welcoming to business. "There's been a change. The outerwear project you were assigned to has been postponed indefinitely. Budget cuts." My heart sank. "Oh, so is the internship?" "The internship is still on," she said quickly, cutting off my panicked thought. "But your department has changed. We're moving you to hosiery." Hosiery. I repeated the word, feeling it turn to dust in my mouth. "Pantyhose. And stockings. And tights," she confirmed, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "It's one of our most profitable and innovative departments. And, interestingly enough, about 25% of our online customer base for sheer pantyhose is male." I must have looked completely bewildered, because she leaned forward, her expression turning earnest. "Think about it. Ethan, you're not just an intern anymore. You're a bridge. You have a perspective that no one else in this company has. You can help us understand and connect with a demographic we've barely scratched the surface of. To do that, you need to understand the product intimately." That was when she slid a sleek black gift box across the desk. It was tied with a crimson ribbon. My name was written on a small card in elegant cursive. "A little welcome gift," she said, "from the team." My hands trembled slightly as I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, was a landscape of foreign objects, a splash of bold red fabric that I slowly identified as a simple, sleeveless sheath dress, a pair of black patent leather pumps with slender, impossibly high heels, and underneath it all, a small, square package containing a pair of sheer black pantyhose. I stared into the box, my face flushing with a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. I felt a dizzying mix of confusion, embarrassment, and a tiny, terrifying spark of something else, something I couldn't name. "The first rule of understanding a product," Clara said, her voice soft but firm, "is to experience it. We can't ask you to be our bridge to a new market if you've never set foot in the water. We need your authentic feedback, your sensory input, how it feels, how it wears, how it makes you feel." She stood up and walked to the door of a small, private changing room attached to her office. She held it open. "So," she said, her gaze locking with mine, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was both a question and a command. "I'll ask again. You really want to wear this?" I looked from her expectant face to the box in my lap. The red dress seemed to glow. The black heels promised a dangerous, unknown territory. My sensible, safe world was miles away. Refusing felt like failure, like admitting I wasn't brave enough for this new life. Accepting felt like... I didn't know what it felt like. It was a step off a cliff. My voice came out as a dry croak. "Yes," I heard myself say, the word feeling alien on my own tongue. "Yes, I do." Clara's smile was subtle, but it reached her eyes. "Good," she said. "I'll be right outside. Take your time." She closed the door, leaving me alone with the box and the deafening sound of my own hammering heart. The changing room was small and minimalist, furnished with only a simple bench and a full-length mirror. The air was cool against my hot skin. For a long moment, I just stood there, the box feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. This was insane. A man in his late 20s, on his first day of a fashion internship, about to put on a dress and pantyhose. My past self, the one who lived in spreadsheets, would have laughed in disbelief. My hands felt clumsy, disconnected from my brain as I finally set the box down and began to undress. Off came my jacket, then my tie, which I loosened with a jerky motion. The button-down shirt felt thick and suffocating. As I unbuttoned it, I caught my reflection in the mirror, a nervous man with wide, uncertain eyes and a pale torso. This was me. This was Ethan. I clung to that certainty. My trousers and socks followed, until I stood only in my plain cotton boxer briefs. The sight of my own hairy legs felt jarringly masculine in this context, a contradiction to the task at hand. I folded my clothes neatly and placed them on the bench, a small act of order in the midst of utter chaos. Then, I turned to the box. I picked up the small, cardboard package of pantyhose first. The model on the front was a woman with impossibly long legs, laughing as she leaned against a cityscape. The texture of the package was smooth, corporate. I tore it open, and a whisper of black nylon unfurled into my hands. It was lighter than I ever could have imagined, like a captured shadow. The material was cool and incredibly soft, flowing over my fingers like liquid silk. I had never touched anything like it. Hesitantly, I gathered one leg, bunching the delicate fabric into a small donut shape, as I'd seen women do in movies. I sat on the edge of the bench, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My foot felt huge and clumsy as I pointed my toes and guided them into the opening. The nylon stretched, a gossamer thin web that clung instantly to my skin. I pulled it up slowly, painstakingly, over my calf, my knee, my thigh. The sensation was electric. It was a cool, constricting smoothness. A second skin that seemed to both highlight and erase the maleness of my leg. The fine hairs on my legs were flattened, rendered invisible beneath the sheer black veil. Every nerve ending felt alive, hyper-aware of the gentle pressure. I repeated the process with the other leg, my movements a little less shaky this time. Then I stood up and pulled the waistband into place. It settled just above my hips, a soft band of elastic that felt surprisingly secure. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me was a paradox. From the waist up, I was still Ethan, pale and uncertain. But from the waist down, I was a stranger. My legs, now encased in a sleek, dark sheen, looked longer, more defined, and unnervingly elegant. The boxer briefs created a lumpy, ridiculous outline beneath the sheer fabric. Shame washed over me, hot and immediate. This was wrong. This was a grotesque parody. "How's it going in there?" Clara's voice called from the other side of the door, making me jump. "Fine," I managed to choke out. "Just getting the hang of it." "How does it feel?" The material she pressed. "Is it smooth? Does it feel cool against your skin?" She was forcing me to acknowledge it, to put words to the sensations I was trying to ignore. "It's smooth," I admitted, my voice low and cool. "Very." "Good, that's our signature microfiber blend. Now, the dress." The dress. I picked up the swath of red fabric. It was made of a sturdy, slightly stretchy material that felt expensive. There was a long zipper down the back. Putting it on was an exercise in awkward contortion. I stepped into it, pulling it up over the strange new texture of my legs. The skirt slid over the pantyhose with a faint, satisfying hiss. I fumbled with the zipper, my arms twisting uncomfortably behind my back until I finally managed to pull it all the way up. The dress settled over my frame, and I turned to face the mirror again. I gasped. The simple, sleeveless cut was mercilessly form-fitting. It cinched at my waist and hugged my hips, creating curves where none existed. My broad shoulders and flat chest strained against the fabric. But the overall effect was transformative. The sleek line of my nylon-clad legs flowed up into the bold red of the dress, creating a silhouette that was utterly alien, yet disturbingly complete. My inner conflict was a raging storm. One part of me screamed in humiliation, wanting to tear these clothes off and run, but another, smaller part, a quiet, curious whisper, was captivated. The reflection in the mirror was a work of fiction, a carefully constructed illusion, but it was a compelling one. The feeling of the dress skimming over the pantyhose with every slight movement was a constant, distracting rustle of sensation. It was both confining and strangely liberating. "Ethan, can I come in?" The request was gentle, but it left no room for refusal. Before I could answer, the door handle turned. I stood frozen, my hands clenched at my sides, as Clara stepped inside. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her arms crossed. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched for an eternity. I felt like a bug under a microscope, every flaw, every ounce of my masculinity in drag exposed for her critical eye. I could feel a blush creeping up my neck, burning my ears. Finally, she took a step forward, then another, circling me slowly like a sculptor examining a piece of marble. "Turn around," she said softly. I obeyed, my movements stiff and robotic. I felt her gaze on my back, tracing the line of the zipper, the way the dress clung to my body. She came to a stop in front of me again. A small, thoughtful smile played on her lips. She reached out a hand, not to touch me, but to gently adjust the neckline of the dress where it was sitting slightly askew on my shoulder. Her fingers brushed my skin for a fleeting second, sending a jolt through my entire body. Well, she said, her voice a low murmur, you look more appealing than I imagined. Her words hung in the air, a strange mix of clinical assessment and genuine surprise. Appealing. It wasn't a word I had ever associated with myself, especially not now. Standing awkwardly in a woman's dress, my mind reeled, trying to process the compliment. But my embarrassment was still a roaring fire. Clara seemed to sense my turmoil. Instead of dwelling on it, she gestured toward the last remaining item from the box, the black patent leather pumps. The final piece of the puzzle, she announced, her tone shifting back to that of a mentor. The shoes dictate the posture, the walk, the entire attitude. Go on. Put them on. I looked down at the shoes. They seemed less like footwear and more like instruments of torture. The heels were at least 4 inches high, thin and sharp like daggers. The glossy black surface reflected the ceiling lights, making them look severe and intimidating. I sat on the bench, my movements clumsy. The sheathed texture of the pantyhose made my feet slide easily into the shoes, but the fit was incredibly snug. My toes were compressed into the pointed tip, and my arches were forced into a dramatic, unnatural curve. When I stood up, my entire body pitched forward. I flailed my arms, grabbing onto the wall to keep from toppling over. Easy. Clara coached, a hint of laughter in her voice. Shift your weight back. It's all in the hips and the core. Small steps. My legs were trembling from the strain. My center of gravity was completely wrong. Every muscle in my calves and thighs screamed in protest. I took a tentative step, then another. The sound of the heels striking the floor was a sharp, definitive clack. A sound I had heard a million times but never produced myself. It felt loud, alien, and deeply feminine. To keep my balance, I found myself unconsciously swaying my hips. A subtle side-to-side motion that felt both ridiculous and strangely intuitive. My posture had changed completely. My back was arched, my chest pushed slightly forward, and my rear was more prominent. I felt taller, more precarious, and incredibly exposed. See, Clara said, watching me with an approving nod. Your body is already adapting. It's finding a new way to move, a new rhythm. She opened the door to her office. Come on, let's take a little walk. Panic seized me. Out there, in front of everyone. Everyone is busy with their own work, she said calmly. Besides, I told you, this is a place without judgment. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I couldn't refuse. Following her out of the changing room felt like stepping onto a stage for a play I hadn't rehearsed. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. Clack, clack, clack. The sound echoed in the quiet office space. A few heads did turn. I saw a couple of young women, fellow interns I presumed, look up from their desks. Their eyes widened in surprise. But I didn't see mockery. Instead, I saw curiosity. And then, one of them smiled and gave me a small, encouraging thumbs up. Just then, 2 of them got up and walked over. I froze, bracing for impact. Wow, Clara! You weren't kidding, said a bubbly brunette. She turned to me, her smile genuine and warm. Hi, I'm Jessica. You must be Ethan. Those shoes are killer. By the way, I can barely walk in that heel height. He's a natural, isn't he? Clara said, placing a light hand on my shoulder. The other girl, a redhead named Emily, circled me with a professional eye. The dress fits you surprisingly well through the shoulders. That's usually the hardest part. Oh, hold on, your strap is twisted. Before I could react, Emily was standing right in front of me, her fingers deftly untwisting the thin strap of the dress near my collarbone. She was so close I could smell the faint, citrusy scent of her perfume. Her proximity was overwhelming, a cloud of femininity that made my head spin. I felt my face flush a deep crimson as her knuckles brushed against my skin. It was a simple, innocent gesture, but it felt intensely intimate, and my body reacted with a jolt of confused electricity. There, she said, stepping back. Perfect. Jessica clapped her hands together lightly. She looks great. Clara, the color is fantastic on her. They were calling me she. The word landed in my brain with a strange resonance. It should have felt wrong, insulting even. But in that moment, surrounded by their unexpected warmth and acceptance, it didn't. The sting of my shame began to recede, replaced by a tentative, flickering warmth. They weren't laughing at the man in the dress. They were complimenting the figure I presented. For the first time, a tiny, fragile bud of confidence began to bloom in my chest. Maybe I didn't look as ridiculous as I felt. Clara watched the entire interaction, her expression thoughtful and calculating. She was observing every blush, every flicker of emotion in my eyes. I was her experiment, and from the look on her face, the results were proving to be very interesting indeed. All right, ladies, back to work, she said, her tone brisk again. Ethan and I have a product to analyze. As they walked away, I stood a little straighter in the high heels, the echo of their acceptance, a comforting buffer against my own internal chaos. The citrus scent of Emily's perfume lingered in the air, a phantom reminder of a closeness that had left me both flustered and strangely intrigued. The journey across the office floor suddenly didn't seem quite so impossible. The next morning, I arrived at the office in my usual male attire, feeling a profound sense of relief. It was a return to normalcy, to the safety of the familiar. But as I walked through the doors of Femme Finesse, the memory of the previous day clung to me like a second skin, the phantom sensation of nylon on my legs, the precarious balance of the heels, the scent of Emily's perfume. It was all still there, just beneath the surface. I had barely settled at my new desk in the hosiery department when Clara appeared. She was holding a hanger. Draped over it was the red dress. In her other hand, she held the black heels. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, her voice bright. "We have our first team brainstorming session for the fall collection in an hour. I'd like you to wear the full ensemble again. We need your perspective. And it's more potent when you're fully immersed in the product." My stomach dropped. Again. Today. And every day. For the first week at least. She replied smoothly, as if discussing the weather. "Consider it your uniform, your induction into the brand." She then held up a small, clear bag containing a simple silver chain necklace and a tube of what looked like tinted lip balm, and a couple of accessories to complete the look. My protests died in my throat. Arguing was futile. This was a condition of the job, a trial I had to endure. With a heavy sigh, I took the items and retreated to the changing room. The process was faster this time, my hands more certain. The pantyhose slid on with a familiar, cool caress. The dress zipped up without a struggle. As I slipped on the necklace, the cold metal against my collarbone was another small, alien sensation. Finally, I stared at the tube of lip balm. It was called Barely Blushing. With a trembling hand, I twisted the tube and applied a light coat. It felt slick and slightly waxy, with a faint, fruity taste. Staring at my reflection, the line between Ethan and the person in the mirror felt thinner, more permeable. The addition of the necklace and the subtle sheen on my lips softened my features in a way that was deeply unsettling. Was I betraying some fundamental part of myself by doing this? Or was I, as Clara had suggested, simply uncovering something that had been hidden? The body in the mirror felt lighter, more graceful. When I moved, the dress and the nylon whispered together, a secret language I was beginning to understand. But the person inside, the mind, was a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The brainstorming session was held in a large conference room. I walked in behind Clara, my high heels making their sharp, distinct sound on the polished concrete floor. The half-dozen people already seated, a mix of men and women, looked up. I saw surprise, a few raised eyebrows, but again, no open hostility. Clara's authority seemed to create a protective bubble around me. I took a seat. Arranging the skirt of my dress over my legs with a self-conscious gesture I must have absorbed from watching women my whole life. The meeting began, and I tried my best to fade into the background. About halfway through, during a lull in the conversation, a male designer named Mark, who sat across from me, leaned forward with a playful smirk. "I've got to say, Clara," he said, his eyes fixed on me. "The new intern is really shaking things up." "Well, hello there. Gorgeous." He winked. It was clearly a joke, a bit of office banter. But it hit me with the force of a physical blow. A man was flirting with me, or, more accurately, with the female persona I was projecting. My mind short-circuited. I didn't know how to react. Was I supposed to be offended? Flattered, amused? A hot, confusing blush spread across my face, and I could only stare down at my hands, my heart hammering in my chest. Clara shot Mark a look that could have frozen lava. "Focus on the designs." "Mark," she said, her voice clipped. She then turned her gaze to me, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Ethan, you've been quiet. You've now spent over 24 hours in our product. What are your thoughts? What can we improve?" Her voice was an anchor. She was pulling me back to the professional reason I was here, the reason I was dressed this way. I took a shaky breath. The waistband. I stammered, my voice sounding higher than usual. "It's comfortable, but after a few hours of sitting, it starts to roll a little. It creates a line that you can see through a dress like this." I pointed to my waist. The simple act of drawing attention to my own body, sending another wave of self-consciousness through me, and the reinforced toe. I continued, gaining a bit of momentum. "It's practical, but it limits the kind of shoes you can wear. It would be visible in an open-toed heel. Maybe we could develop a sheerer, more durable material that doesn't need such a thick reinforcement." Silence. I was sure I had said something stupid. Then, the head of design, a stern-looking woman named Maria, nodded slowly. "The sheer toe durability issue is something we've struggled with for years," she said, looking at me with newfound respect. "And the rolling waistband. He's right. We get that feedback from customers. 2. Mark. The designer who had just been teasing me now looked genuinely impressed. That's a great point. Coming from someone who's actually wearing it right now, that's valuable. Praise rippled around the table. My ideas, born from my own uncomfortable experience, were being treated as valid, insightful contributions. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a sense of purpose. I wasn't just a man in a dress being paraded around for some strange corporate experiment. I was a researcher. My experience, as bizarre and confusing as it was, had value. I was contributing. I was being heard. I was doing my job, and I was doing it while dressed as a woman. After the meeting, Clara walked with me back to my desk. "You see," she said quietly, her voice full of a meaning I was only just beginning to grasp. "You're not betraying yourself, Ethan. You're exploring a part of yourself you've always hidden. And in doing so, you're becoming better at this job than anyone else could be." Her words resonated deep within me, chipping away at the walls of my resistance. Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't a betrayal. Maybe it was an evolution. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. I worked on spreadsheets, analyzed sales data, and researched competitive fabrics. But every task was filtered through the lens of my new reality. I was acutely aware of the constant, gentle pressure of the pantyhose against my legs, the way I had to shift my weight in the high heels when standing at the printer, the soft whisper of the dress as I walked to the coffee machine. These sensations were a constant hum beneath the surface of my thoughts, a persistent reminder of the person I appeared to be. The workday ended, and Clara gave me a nod. "You can change back now. See you tomorrow." The relief I expected to feel was strangely absent. In the changing room, the process of removing the clothes felt different this time. Peeling off the dress was like shedding a skin. When I rolled the pantyhose down my legs, my own skin felt pale and oddly numb without the sleek nylon covering. The air felt cold against my bare legs. Then I put on my own clothes. My jeans felt rough and abrasive. My shirt felt baggy and shapeless. My heavy, flat-soled shoes felt like lead weights. I looked in the mirror and saw Ethan again, the familiar face, the masculine clothes. But something had changed. He looked drab. He looked like a costume. The walk home was a disorienting experience. I was just another man on the crowded sidewalk, invisible in my mundane attire. But I felt like a spy. I watched the women who passed by with a completely new perspective. I noticed the way they carried themselves, the confident click of their heels on the pavement, the effortless grace with which they navigated the world in clothes that I now knew required constant, subtle adjustments. I felt a bizarre sense of camaraderie, of shared experience, even though they had no idea. That evening, after a silent, solitary dinner, I found myself standing in front of the full-length mirror on my bedroom closet door. The meeting, Mark's flirtatious comment, Clara's praise, the feeling of my own clothes, it all swirled in my head. I touched the rough denim of my jeans, then closed my eyes and tried to summon the memory of the smooth, sheer nylon. I could feel it so clearly. I could feel the constricting hug of the dress, the precarious height of the heels that forced a different posture, a different way of moving through the world. My reflection stared back at me, a man in a plain t-shirt and jeans. This was me. This had always been me. But was it the only me? The image of the person in the office mirror superimposed itself over my current reflection, the sleek legs, the red dress, the hint of gloss on the lips. That person had been praised. That person had been called gorgeous. That person had felt powerful in a strange, terrifying, new way. "I'm just a guy," I whispered to the reflection, the words sounding hollow in the quiet room. "I'm just a guy doing a weird job." But a rebellious thought rose to challenge it. But what if you're not? What if you could be anything you wanted to be, that person in the mirror? Part of you liked being her. The internal conflict was a physical ache in my chest. I was fighting a battle against a part of myself I never knew existed. A part that had been awakened by a swath of red fabric and a whisper of black nylon. Was I resisting this transformation? Or was I resisting the acceptance of it? The line was so blurry I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Ethan, it's Clara. I just wanted to say you did excellent work today. I know this is a lot to ask, but I see something in you, a potential you're not even aware of yet." A second text came through a moment later. "If you ever want to stop, if this is too much, I will understand. Just say the word. But I think you belong in this more than anyone." Her words were a perfect echo of the battle raging in my own head. She was offering me an exit, a return to the safety of my old self. But her final sentence was a powerful lure, a validation of the strange new feelings I was experiencing. "You belong in this." I looked back at the mirror, at the plain, unremarkable man staring back at me. Then I thought of the confident, poised figure I had been just a few hours ago, the sound of my heels clicking with purpose on the office floor. That sound, that sharp clack, clack, had been jarring at first. But as the day wore on, it had started to sound less like a noise I was making and more like a rhythm I was following. It had begun to sound like my own heartbeat. I didn't reply to Clara's text. I didn't have an answer. I turned off the light and got into bed. But I knew sleep would not come easily. The question wasn't about what I would wear to work tomorrow. It was about who I would be. The choice was mine. And for the first time in my life, I was terrified that I might choose the stranger in the mirror over the man I had always known. The next morning felt like the dawn of a new era. I woke up with a strange sense of resolution, though I still couldn't have put it into words. I showered, shaved, and then stood before my closet, looking at the neat rows of men's shirts and trousers. They seemed like relics from another person's life. Without making a conscious decision, I found myself bypassing them all. I got dressed in the clothes I wore home yesterday, but I packed the red dress, the heels, and a brand new pair of pantyhose, which I'd been given to test for durability, into my satchel. When I arrived at the office, I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to the changing room. The transformation was routine now, a ritual, as I pulled on the pantyhose. The cool, smooth fabric felt less like a costume and more like a necessary layer, a part of getting ready for the day. The dress zipped up easily. I stepped into the heels and took a moment, standing before the mirror. The person looking back was no longer a complete stranger. Her features were my features. Her eyes were my eyes. The confusion was still there, but it was now mingled with a growing sense of familiarity, of acceptance. I walked out to my desk, my steps even, and measured. The clack of my heels a steady, confident rhythm on the floor. Jessica and Emily waved as I passed, their smiles easy and natural. Mark, the designer from yesterday, gave me a respectful nod, his earlier smirk completely gone. I felt normal. It was the most abnormal feeling I'd ever had. Later that morning, Clara called me into her office. "I didn't get a reply to my text," she said. her expression neutral as she gestured for me to sit. I sat, taking care to cross my legs in a way that felt surprisingly natural. The nylon-on-nylon hiss, a subtle punctuation mark. I didn't have an answer. I said honestly, I think coming in like this today is the answer. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. I thought it might be, she said. Fashion isn't about hiding who you are, Ethan. It's about revealing it. Sometimes you just have to reveal a truth you didn't know was there. She leaned forward, her tone becoming more confessional. I chose you for this role for a reason. I saw your application, your background in data analysis. It was all about structure, rules, black and white. But in your cover letter, you wrote about the emotion of textiles and the narrative of a silhouette. I saw a conflict in you, a poet trapped in the body of an accountant. I suspected you had a hidden language, and I just gave you the grammar to speak it. Her insight was so sharp, so accurate. It left me speechless. She saw right through the facade I had built for myself over the years. I want you to spend the rest of the day just being, she instructed. Don't focus on tasks. Focus on the experience. Get coffee. Walk to the supply closet. Notice how the world interacts with you, and how you interact with it. It was a strange assignment. I spent the next few hours doing just that. Getting coffee was a small adventure. I had to navigate the crowded kitchenette with more care, my movements more deliberate. A male colleague from another department held the door open for me, a simple courtesy I had never experienced before. When I said thank you, my voice came out softer than I intended, and he just smiled and said, "No problem. Miss?" He didn't even blink. To him, I was simply a woman who worked in his office. The ease of his acceptance was both liberating and profoundly disorienting. At the end of the day, I returned to the changing room. The process of disrobing was now tinged with a faint melancholy. Taking off the heels felt like stepping down from a platform, both physically and metaphorically. As I peeled off the pantyhose, the lingering scent of the office perfume, a mix of textiles and fragrances, clung to my skin. Putting on my male clothes felt like a betrayal. The rough denim, the loose shirt, the heavy shoes, they felt like a lie. I looked in the mirror at Ethan, the man, and for the first time, I felt a deep and aching sense of loss for the woman I was leaving behind in that room. Walking home, the city streets felt different again. I was invisible, just another guy in the crowd. But my internal landscape had been permanently altered. I was no longer just a spectator to the world of femininity. I was a participant, a visitor who had been given a temporary passport to another country. I understood the language now, the subtle cues, the physical realities. That night, I stood before my closet once more. My male wardrobe seemed monochromatic, a flat, one-dimensional representation of a person I was no longer sure I was. My mind, however, was filled with color and texture, the bold crimson of the dress, the glossy black of the heels, the sheer shadow of the pantyhose. Clara had given me a choice. Society had given me a label. But the person in the mirror, the one who was beginning to feel more real than the man I had been my entire life, was offering me an identity. The question was no longer about acceptance or resistance. The battle was over. The question now was much simpler and infinitely more complex. What was I going to wear tomorrow, and who would I become when I put it on? The echo of my own high-heeled footsteps on the office floor seemed to hold the answer, a rhythm for a new life, waiting for me to step into it.